Our general session is such an important discussion. As I thought about Kelli and others, I knew it'd be really hard to decide which group to be in. So we are going to drop those other two sessions and do just one general session. So surprise for those that were not aware. Again, we know folks are busy. So if you do need to take some time and do other work, that is fine as well. But we do hope you at least listen in, and you can turn off that video if you're not using it. But for those that are part of the discussion, please do join us for the next 70 minutes. Again, we'll go through the topic, background, spotlight perspectives. We do want to have a healthy group discussion on this, get some feedback and next steps from the group on where we go on this very important topic.
And it's so nice to see everybody's faces. Thank you all who have your cameras on. It's so good to see you again. I'm really excited that Nathan and the Construction Progress Coalition have created this space for us to continue having these conversations, even as we're all recovering from 2020 and the post-COVID world of how we're getting back to travel. This topic in particular, I feel like was top of mind prior to 2020, but now even more so, I think, as we're coming out of the world kind of taking a pause. It didn't help for a lot of people who thought that a pause would maybe potentially help create some space to address burnout. And for those of us who work virtually, no break. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. And we want to talk about that topic specifically, really about burnout in our industry and the impact that it's having, not just on the individual, but stepping back and looking at the data from a retention standpoint. So what is the impact it's having on retention of our top talent in industry? So today, what we're going to do is use the Construction Progress Coalition framework to evaluate some of these root causes. And also, we want to be able to update you on some of the research that we concluded last year. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to two entrepreneurs in industry who are going to share their stories with us, Kristina Henkai from SoBuilt, as well as Dr. G, as she's known, Dr. Giovanna Brasfield from Brasfield and Associates. I think it's really important that we are hearing from those who represent some of the demographics we'll be talking about. So let's dive into it. So how might we, I'm back, Nathan. Let's talk through the CPC framework of today. We want to really talk about how might we address the systemic burnout experienced by high performers across A, E, and C, architecture, engineering, and construction, because it exists across all three, in ways that shed light on the impacts and root causes of this cultural epidemic. I don't know anyone in the A, E, or C who is not feeling this in one way or another. So that we might think about self-care and mental wellness initiatives and really intentionally ensure that they become standard practice across human resources, safety, and as a part of a project pursuit practice. That statement here, just so we're all clear, is very aspirational. This is really what we're seeing as where we want to be and where we want to land. So before I introduce the speakers today to share their stories, I do want to take a step back. Again, being Construction Progress Coalition is trying to base everything in data and factual understanding, a way of making sense of the world around us. I want to just give you a little bit of an update. So last year, we launched the Construction Talent Retention Survey. Thank you to Nathan and the team for supporting us in this initiative. And really what we were doing was with some partners, we had Brick and Mortar Ventures, we had NAWIC, National Association of Women in Construction, AGC of California, and YOPS, who were our partners to fund this important research program. We were looking for ways to understand where is construction around talent retention. And if you missed it, Nathan was there, Yuhi Aizawa Kambadi from AGC, and Betsy Bagley, the co-founder and director at Pulsely, who was our technology research partner here. There's a Foundations for Progress webinar series that is linked to the Construction Progress Coalition's landing page for the survey. If you haven't seen them unpack the data, I strongly encourage you to watch the Foundations for Progress webinar on demand. There's a ton of information here that should be in the hands of our leaders in order to help them understand and make sense around some of the topics we're going to dive into today. So let's jump into what the survey uncovered. I think, yeah, perfect. So this really here is a way for you to look at who are we talking about? Who is the audience and who did we survey? So starting from the left and kind of moving over right, we kind of categorize them in groups of retention. So those who are content in their jobs, they're not looking to leave. Those who are considering a job change, potentially changing the current role they're in. Those who had actually changed jobs. So they left their role and went to a new company. And then the final demographic, and if you look, that's the largest demographic we have, are those who actually left the industry. So this was very much a grassroots level initiative where we sent out to our peers to say, hey, we really want to have a better understanding. The gender breakup here was about 55% men, 44% women. This is really unusual. As we know, our makeups of women in the industry is around 14%. Wall Street Journal reported it. Nobody can prove it. So let's say between 10 and 14% to be accurate. So it's interesting that we have almost a even split between men and women in this, the research demographic. Then if we look at, and I think, race and ethnicity is a part of this. This is a factor of who we were speaking to and what their perspective is. And this breakup and breakdown is really important to keep in mind here. We're looking at the perspectives of the majority here being a white perspective, but we're looking at others which we would consider to be part of underrepresented groups who are not part of that majority, and really getting a sense of what is it like for them to be in the industry and doing this work. And what is that experience like? Because that's part of what we think plays a role into burnout, is that sense of belonging, not being there or being other, and having to take that on top of all the other stressors of the industry. So that'll give you a sense of who was really, and I cover the retention group, so we can kind of skipped ahead.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So we can kind of do, like, this is at a very high level. What did we learn? And the key factors that are driving a lot of that retention challenge is the top three is lack of career advancement, really wanting better pay, and work-life conflict. The career advancement piece, if you look, each color corresponds to a different demographic across the survey participants. And so if we look at people of color in the first, career advancement, that is one of the things top of mind for them is, I'm not advancing in my career as quickly as I would like to, or I feel I should be. And so that's something that's incredibly top of mind for them. Better pay for, it's interesting, the men in this group, as well as people of color, both were commenting that they feel like better pay should be a part of how they're rewarded in the work that they're doing. And then work-life conflict. I know the graphs show some disparity, but if we look at this kind of across quadrants, that's almost consistent then across all demographics is the work-life conflict. So regardless of the demographics that you're kind of coming to the survey with, it is a major challenge. The one thing that I want to draw your attention to is the top right graph. These are those, the orange color are those who considered a job change. So they're thinking about a job change. If you look at career advancement, better pay, and conflicts with manager is what comes in here as what was the top three. So for those who are thinking about leaving the industry, conflict with the manager overrode this idea of the work-life conflict being an issue. And if we look down below at those who changed jobs in industry and those who actually left, work-life conflict, location commuting, and conflicts with manager are taking precedence here. So all in all, what we're looking at is what could be some of the key factors or some of the key decisions that are driving individuals to leave industry. And we didn't have this data before. No, we do. It's imperfect, but it at least gives us a starting point for having a conversation. Nathan, I didn't know if you had a comment. You look like you may have had a
Well, no, I'm excited for the next one.
So one of the things that this was an aha moment for me, our research partner who does this type of deep dive analytics into HR policies, procedures, performance reviews with organizations. This was not an aha moment for her. But one of the things that we're looking at here is just taking a step back and looking at strongly agree, neutral, and strongly disagree as one of the reasons I'm considering leaving the industry is because of inclusion challenges that leave me feeling like I don't belong here. What's interesting is that the LGBTQIA plus community is at the highest level of strongly agree. I don't think that's surprising to anyone on this call. And I don't think it's surprising for those who are in leadership either. Women are also skewing strongly in the strongly agree. What we're noticing around people of color is that they're definitely not in the strongly disagree, but in more towards that neutral space of it's not necessarily the key factor. But one of the things that was most telling, I think, is if we look at the quadrant for majority men who answered and responded, they're more leaning towards that strongly disagree into the neutral space, which means if it's not a problem for you, it's not a problem. And when we look at the industry where a large portion are men in leadership positions, and a lot of them are white men in leadership, straight white men in leadership positions, it makes sense that when you're trying to have conversations around employee burnout and retention, inclusion, do people feel like they belong? Do they feel like they're valued? They're having issues with their conflict with their direct manager. A lot of that is because those who are in positions of leadership don't recognize at the same degree that others do that there is a problem and that the problem exists outside of themselves. And so that was one piece that I thought was really, really interesting to see. So, and this is why I love the CPC. Let's look at this from a root cause standpoint. Nathan and I have these conversations all the time, but it was exciting to do this in a research capacity. And I think it's really important to dive into some of so that's kind of the data and the responses that the survey had. But what we were missing was the first person voice. So we added places where people could do comments or share comments, and we're protecting the innocent here, but we're going to rephrase some of the comments that we saw. So one of the root causes that we're recognizing here is something we'll call groupthink. This is so prevalent, I think. I mean, anyone on this call who's in charge of selling technology to the industry is very aware of this. Anyone who's in charge of implementing software within a firm in the industry is aware. Some of the comments that we heard around groupthink was inability of moving beyond prescribed methodology. So hitting your head against that wall of this is how we've always done it. I'm hopeful that in 2023, this is how we've always done it is not the immediate response. But even if that verbiage has been made awareness around how that is a fixed mindset versus a change mindset, and we've gone through all the training, a lot of times that still is some of the barriers that we reach when we don't see policies changing, when we don't see things at the organizational leadership changing. And then my performance is not being rewarded. I think one of the things, Nathan, that came up was even like, how do we rate performance? How are we measuring performance? KPIs for a business, let alone KPIs or goals for an individual contributor on a project. If we're not really measuring the business at that level yet, or we're just starting to, thinking about that individual measurement, I think is really important. So groupthink was one of the factors. The second was unconscious and conscious bias. If you've done anything in the last few years around training and educating yourself, I know I have done a lot around what is conscious bias, what is unconscious bias. Bias is just the way your brain operates. I think of it oftentimes like a computer. It creates shortcuts in order to use less cognitive energy to make decisions and to understand, like a taxonomy, to understand the world around you and make sense of it without overburdening the cognitive load on your brain, which means we all have bias. So understanding unconscious and conscious bias in relationship to burnout and what's impacting retention was really important. And one of the comments that was made was, as soon as I informed the company that I was expecting my first child, and this individual was clearly showing as well, they fired me and I was 26 weeks pregnant. That's not an uncommon story, sadly. Since we did the survey, I've had quite a few women reach out reflecting on how even just answering the question was a bit difficult, because it brought back and flooded back all of those feelings of that path to motherhood becoming the career killer in construction. And that's something that's a policy, that's a program, totally can be solved. But we created policy, and is leadership aware that that's something that is a root cause of why so many women leave industry? And then one of the other ones we discovered or kind of uncovered here is, this is how we've always done it. So the owner attitude and the culture, general direction of industry, a lot of common sense or common issues spanning companies that show no sign of being resolved. So even though the words, this is how we've always done it, may not be the key phrase used anymore, the lack of organizational change that's instituting things that are either policies, plans, programs, safety nets, to address these issues head on, is what those, especially those who left industry, was a key driver. And finally is the majority doesn't experience the problem. So when you have leadership in roles where their experience isn't first person, they're not experiencing the same project trailer rooms, the same meetings with HR, the same conflicts in the field. If it's not part of their first person experience, it takes leadership leaning in to really make sure that they're aware of it. These quotes I thought were really telling. Not feeling challenged or aligned with long-term goals. So the long-term goals of that organization don't take into mind some of these groups that are not part of that majority. How do we create pathways to promotion? How do we create succession plans? Are we only looking for future leaders that look like us, or that do the activities and the things that we do, hunting trips, golfing, excursions, where we take that time to build out what our succession bench looks like because we spend time with commonalities. If those commonalities don't exist, we have to be intentional about our succession planning program. And then this last one, owner and I had a shared vision, but the rest of the org was not on the same page. And 2 people were allowed to be cancers because they were good at their jobs. At Procore, we often call this the brilliant asshole, which is nobody who's really brilliant at their job, but they're straight up toxic to the work environment, and they create more havoc and wreak more havoc than they do good. But if we don't have cultures and performance evaluations and programs that allow the business to address this throughout the structure of the organization, based on what we were seeing and the conversations we're having, I think we're going to continue to lose top talent, especially as we're investing so much to attract women and underrepresented groups into our industry to expand that talent pool. These are some key things that I think leaders can point to and figure out to discuss and really start to think about what their strategy and their plan is. So again, if you haven't had a chance to see the survey, I'm seeing some of the comments in chat, and I haven't read through them fully, but if you go to the Construction Progress Coalition's website that you see here, you can download the actual executive brief of this report. You can download a deeper dive into the data. You can. A Forbes reporter was watching when Nathan and the panelists were on the Foundations for Progress webinar, And that reporter wrote a write-up in Forbes about this conversation, a topic, and it was critical. It was critical of the industry. Some of it was critical of Procore as well. And so that it was great to get an honest read from an outsider kind of looking in. So that's there, as well as the link to the webinar itself. So I think now we can, I think we've laid the groundwork for you all here, looking at last year. We didn't have any data around this, and we were talking since 2020, 2021, 2022 around diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging, and listening to individuals from the industry's perspectives around these topics. But we really didn't have a lot of data. Now we have some data to share with you to create some root cause analysis of what we think some of these challenges may be. And so now I'm very excited to introduce you to one of our speakers. We're going to speak with Kristina Henkai first. And really, as we consider the factors around burnout as it relates to talent retention and performance, I'm excited for Kristina to share her story and her journey to entrepreneurship with you. Just a little bit about Kristina before I ask her first question. I had the pleasure of meeting Kristina earlier this year and was introduced to her, I think it was Q1 of this year, and had a chance to have dinner with her and learn more about the work that she was doing. And I was compelled by her story and what brought her to the place of saying we need to think differently in construction around how we build teams, how we build trust, how we perform so we can avoid burnout. It was a very compelling story, and I'm excited for her to share it with you here. She's been in this industry for over 11 years. She's worked with teams to create sustainable implementations of technology. She's leveraged 4D planning. If she's a 4D planning expert, by the way. So side note, if you wanted to pick her brain on that. And her most unique ability is really how to leverage technology to build connections between seemingly siloed departments, increasing the overall adoption and ease. And she's become a master facilitator of in-person and virtual workshops around innovation and fighting burnout. Kristina, thank you for being here today. So excited to have you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Sasha. The way I want to start out this portion, like I do most things, is with a little bit of sort of a setting of a place and a little bit of a story. And I think it goes really well with the demographics that you just showed, Sasha, because that work-life balance bar was me, the one that says, do I leave the industry or do I not leave the industry? It was a big contemplation. You can go to the next slide, Nathan. I like to have this little picture here just to show like the intro of my rock bottom story. Unfortunately, a lot of people have them and they just won't really talk about it, and maybe they blame it on themselves. But that's a whole nother topic. Well, let me tell you about this one week about 2 years ago. And I was on one of these virtual calls, and it was a report out, and they were asking me, how did you do this week? And I listed all the things, complete checklist, done, done, done. And I got nothing but praise and positive things. And just really from the outside, it looked like I was probably like killing it. And it was really doing really great, high performer. Got another email from a client, again, praise, good performance, all the things that mark, quote unquote success. But later that night, like I've said before, nobody knew, including my own husband, that it was going to be one of the worst weeks of my career. And it wasn't because of the performance, but it was because of the imbalance of work and life. And so go to the part where you're a parent at nighttime, right? And you're reading a story, and I have my 2 sons next to me. I'm exhausted, but I'm still trying to do it. And I remember reading a sentence, and right in the middle of the sentence, with no notice, I didn't feel lightheaded, nothing like that. My body just completely shut down. passed out completely. No one noticed. They thought I just fell asleep. So everything seemed normal. I woke up about 8 hours later. I remember still like the second half of that sentence. It was like a complete reboot. And then I went to the bathroom and everything was wrong. Tried to like wash my hands with toothpaste and brush my teeth with soap. And I'm just standing there like looking at this mess of a person. And even in that moment, I did not think it was the work. I didn't think it was the late hours and all this sort of stuff. I thought, man, there might be just something off with me. Like, what did I do? And flash forward to a few days later, I'm in the hospital getting my brain scanned, all these sort of things. And I'm 30 years old in the hospital wondering, what the heck am I doing in my life? And I had this point where everybody was telling me to quit my job and the industry because they knew it wouldn't get better at another company, wouldn't get better at another situation. I'm getting like hot telling this, but it's very real. And the one thing that I felt so compelled about was I never wanted anybody else to feel this way and be in this hospital situation. But at the same time, I was 100% sure that they would, because of how things are set up, because of how we have this sort of success praise, but not looking at a balanced approach. There's just so many things. And Sasha and Dr. G, you talk about more about that as well. But it really compelled me to start creating the types of experiences and programs and teachings that I feel like do look at a people-driven approach and holistic approach to how do we not only learn new things, but how do we work together better and how do we deliver better results and not destroy that person? Because being a high performer typically means that you are some sort of bottleneck. Because they're like, just go to Nathan, go to Sasha, go to Dr. G. And then you just like, you get all the things and it looks great, but it's just not sustainable. So that's the main reason I'm creating more of these types of programs, events, and it's around all those types of topics. So to leave or not to leave, I decided to stay technically and just change it to be the industry that I continue to love and want to be a part of. You can go to the next slide.
And that I'm so glad that you did decide to stay, Kristina. I'm really excited for you to dive into this piece, which really talks about the kind of the cornerstone of how you're building these engagements. So I'll let you continue. Please share with us the I'll call them the three pillars of your roadmap of engagement.
Thank you. So these didn't come right away to me. For the next year or so, I started to talk to more and more people, and of course, very privately, not on webinars because I wasn't at that level. I wouldn't tell people my story. But I noticed people were relating in different ways. They're like, oh yeah, I also was hospitalized, but I didn't tell anybody. Or I also got so burnt out, I started taking it out on my family, but no one at work knew, and there's just all these things. And I would have these quasi therapy sessions, if I really think about it, with these people. And we would go through each of this belonging, purpose, and curiosity. Oh, go backwards, Nathan. But yeah. And those are the three main. And what I noticed is that when you have one of those, you're probably on the brink of going to some sort of burnout cycle if you only have one. When you have 2 out of 3, you can teeter-totter. It depends on how red everything is on the subsets. And then I have not really found people that have a fully green all 9 yet, but it's really a quantitative measure that I've found that helps us figure out like, where are people right now internally, and are they on a road to fulfillment or burnout? And we can go through that by testing each of these measures. So you can go to the next slide, Nathan. There's 9 total, 3 within each. But I just wanted to give you one from each of the 3 that we can walk through together to sort of self-assess ourselves. And then you can get a feeling of the inner workings of each of these bits. So in the chat, I would love it if you guys could interact a little bit here. We're going to start with purpose. And the question that you ask yourself here is, do you trust your supervisor or your team? And do you get the sense that they fully trust? Oh, oops. I mixed the colors. I'm sorry. The problem question is actually the green. I'm sorry for anyone that's like dyslexic. But in your day-to-day position, is it extremely clear what specific problem you're tasked to solve? Or do you feel like you're just kind of going through the motions? And if you answer like it is extremely clear, you can go back. No one could confuse me about what we need to achieve. I absolutely know. Then that we can put in, you say green. So it's like a green light. Green light, I know exactly what I'm doing. No one could even question it. I can explain it backwards. And then but it has to be like perfect. And then if it's not, if it's really bad, if you feel like you're just kind of putting out reports or just like doing the same thing over and over again, and you're not really sure what you're solving anymore, it just feels like you're just doing for the sake of doing, then that's red. And anywhere in between would be a yellow light. So if you could put in the chat, where are you guys right now if you were to self-assess yourself on problem in your day-to-day? Is it extremely clear what specific problem you're tasked to solve? Green, yellow, or red? Okay. Getting some DMs. Interesting. Okay, green, red, green, yellow. Good.
Just so you know, Kristina, there's like some auto setting that keeps moving it forward. So sorry, I'll move it back.
Oh, okay. Got it. Right. Okay. Good. And Rob, your note about how it's only because of recent leadership changes, that's interesting because it leads into the next measure on this category of belonging, which is trust. So let's move over to trust now. I'll create a little divider here. Do you trust your supervisor or your team? And do you get the sense that they fully trust you? Okay. If there is like no doubt, you think that they got you and you know that they're not going to be second guessing or anything, that's green. If there's a doubt, it's yellow. If it's really bad and it's combative and toxic, it's likely red. Let's share some of those. Here. Red. I hate to see a red. Honestly, it just makes me so sad. But it happens more often than not. Yes, trust but verify. Okay. Nuclear. Got it. All right. So we got a mix of there. And then now let's move to the curiosity circle. Again, we need to have a healthy balance of feeling like we're getting our purpose fulfilled, feeling like we truly belong in where we are spending majority of our time in our life, and to feel like we're getting our curiosity fulfilled. And there's wonder, unknown, and play in there. But play, to me, seems to be sort of this catalyst to curiosity. And one of the ways you can ask yourself that is, are you applying some sort of play or experimentation as a regular part of your job? And let me put in the word play up there. And again, green is like I play all day, right? And I think actually a lot of you are going to be green. Yellow, it's like, yeah, every now and then. And red is like play is not for work, right? Like if that's your mentality, play is not for work, it's red.
So that's wrong.
It's adaptable. I feel like we need to chat about it. Yeah. Okay. Good. I love to get others to do more. Thank you, Mr. AI. Entering the market. Yes. So we don't have all day to do this, but it's one of my favorite exercises, especially to do one-on-one with people, because you start to gain a little bit more self-awareness of your current conditions. And then with that clarity, I feel like clarity is sort of like the biggest gift you can give people, because and then it can see like, what can I do next? So I hope that looking at how you're assessing yourself on at least just these 3 is helpful. I have the roadmap for like all 9 that you can have as well. But that's like, yeah, you can just email me. But are there any insights that people are finding or specific scenarios that you feel like is leading to a red that you want to share? Because I did see some reds in one of these here.
I love the comments. These are great.
Company, so I'm taking your try. Okay, Jonathan. I did this on me, full transparency, guys. I did this on me, and I even like called Charlie about it. And I'm like, I hate that my framework is working because I'm doing it to me. Like, and that goes back to sort of the group think, what is normalized, right? And it's like, I used to think that my grinding was just work. My burnouts was work. I didn't call it by all these other words. It just literally was like, that's how you're supposed to destroy yourself until you retire, right? So yeah, good insight. Okay. So I want to make sure there's time for Dr. G as well. We can go to the next slide. The next slide is where I'm talking about, sorry, I jumped ahead in my own head, but there was this question that was posed earlier, and I think we're going to talk about it later as well. But what do we do to continue this? How, when we have these wonderful workshops or these wonderful summits or meetings or aha moments, how do you continue that? And the need for that in our industry is why I'm starting to create this action-oriented community. There's going to be a mastermind, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And it's about this idea of there's a bunch of us, little mavericks all over the place, trying to build things, but that can get lonely sometimes. And you need that continuous connection and diversity of thought in order to amplify these ideas, not just in this fun little echo chamber, but like truly get sustainable implementation so that things change. Somebody said earlier in the chat, do less with more, or do less with less, or do more with less. And he's like, well, maybe it's actually do less with more help. And I'm like, exactly. That's what we need. We need that continuity. So that's why I'm creating this mastermind. And I just wanted to share that with you guys, because that's going to be a new one. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to that hyperlink to learn a little bit more. And there'll be information on the framework there, and we can get on a call to sort of talk about your one-on-ones. This is also on that website. It's just some like testimonials of people. I know it's like really tiny. You're not going to be able to see it.
So these people look familiar.
Yeah, so some of these people, but the idea is to create more of these types of experience where people are talking about transformation and holistic approaches rather than just tech, or rather than just soft stuff. I wanted to marry the idea of technology and the person and not just separating them. So you can go to the next slide. This is all my contact information. Here's a little image of what the spreadsheet looks like for all you analytical people. It is color coded, and the map will automatically update based off of your answers. So I think Excel nerds will love it, because I know I did. And yeah, you can email me at Kristina@SoBuilt.com if you have any questions or anything else.
That is so cool. I didn't see the video until just now.
Yeah, I just did a quick screen recording from PowerPoint where you can just get it. But I appreciate you guys all sharing. Thank you so much for typing in the chat. I know, especially if you were reds, sometimes you don't want to share when we're red. And I do hope that all the greens were truly green. That's the only things I got to say. But yeah, I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. G now, because I'm really excited hear what she has to say as well.
Or I'll do a quick segue. So thank you, Kristina. That was awesome. And for even more, a quick plug for Construction Dork. So Jeff did record with a bunch of folks that were there and kind of that, just after fact. And I forget, Sasha, Charlie said something that just absolutely blew your mind.
Oh my God.
I made
the mistake of listening to the post podcast early in the morning on a Saturday, because it's typically my weekdays are just so packed. The weekends are now reserved for ideation and catching up. And Charlie's last 3 minutes riff just blew my mind. And Kristina, I have to circle back with you. I think he hit on exactly what we should be doing, which is tying this initiative to larger initiatives and kind of milestones that have been created. So yeah, if you have a chance, I highly encourage you to take a listen.
And thank you, Jonathan. Good point. There is also another episode with Kristina that was recorded beforehand on burnout. So yeah, great further stuff to dig in. But Sasha, let's continue.
Yes, absolutely. So I have some additional questions for Kristina, but I'm going to actually save them till after Dr. G presents, and then we'll do a kind of a live Q&A. And please, if you have questions, make sure they're top of mind, because we're going to include an open audience Q&A in addition to the chat. So make sure you have your questions ready. Dr. Giovanna Brasfield, or Dr. G, as she's known by many in the industry, has 18 plus years of construction industry experience. She is a certified WBE, WSB, and DBE. So for those of you who are looking to partner and have partners in your roster who are from the DBE network, Dr. G is definitely somebody you should have on speed dial. She's an industry advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. She does DEI program development, training and education, and outreach. And she's an expert in this area. I have partnered with her. I have picked her brain, and I know many large organizations in our industry have also taken advantage of her knowledge. She was the 2023 Comerica Bank Women's Business Award for a Woman of Diversity. I got to see that and celebrate that with her on LinkedIn. We're super excited for that. The 2023 AGC of California Associate of the Year. Congrats on that one. And she is the AGC of California Construction Education Foundation board member, chair of AGC California DEI Steering Committee. Love some of the work you've been doing there. And chair of RAND Corporation's Center for Advanced Racial Equity Policy as part of that steering committee. If you've not checked out RAND recently, it was a name from my childhood. And so when Dr. G first put this on my radar, and I started to look into the work that they're doing, and she shared it with me, I'm really, really excited for that work. So Dr. G, I want to turn it over for you now, just if you could tell us a bit about your story of your 18 plus years in experience, but what was the catalyst that really caused you to take a journey towards entrepreneurship?
Well, thank you, Sasha, and thank you, Nathan, for pulling together today's conversation that's so pertinent when it comes to just burnout, retention, recruitment in our industry. I think back to, I was caused to raise my hand. I love a good challenge. Someone asked me about policy. Was young in my career, very new to construction, and someone said, "Hey, do you think you can learn about DBE certification? And this particular policies would help get more businesses certified so they can do business at the time with the state." And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll try it out. From that journey, truly, truly changed my life and what I wanted to do for my future. I had a chance to learn, listen, advocate, fight for those often overlooked, not included in jobs and opportunities or RFPs, making sure there was equality, making sure there was advocacy, and wearing so many different hats within that overall process of inclusion. As you know, the last couple of years, we've been faced with so much when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, having a people of need. And so I was at one of the higher ranking executive roles within my organization. Had a chance in my career to serve at commercial as well as civil construction companies, working with many different agencies and owners and various different community groups across the country, and hearing concern after concern after concern of how do we do this? Why is this important? Do we have to do it? Is this because of the recent issues that are going on in our country at that particular time? So people kept reaching out to me, asking me questions. How can we pivot? Is this going away? Why now? Oh my gosh, is this real? These policies and practices and adversity when it comes to how do we retain our workforce? We're at a shortage. So with all these questions being asked of me from different organizations, and so I felt at that point, what do I do? I'm truly at this pathway. Either I could go to the left, which is stay where I am, make no change. I'm serving in a high capacity executive role for a major organization doing phenomenal work across. I'm leading and working very closely with their business resource group team and internal leadership. You can go to the right. I could really just continue to stay where I'm at. I don't even have to look at the next level up in the executive role and what that means to this particular organization or industry, having a chief level position, which I was at that time getting poached by one organization to think about chief diversity officer role, which they hadn't created. And they're like, we created for you. You just go to the right. We'll create this position. We'll bring you on. But my question was readiness. Readiness. Are you ready to take on what that means when it comes to creating this chief role? Really thinking about the behind the scenes support, the financial, the organizational, the buy-in, all of these things that we think about as leaders that really make a difference for our position in our jobs on day to day. Or I can go straight ahead, which was all of these organizations that are on the E&R's list asking little old me, someone who just raised their hand to make a difference. So I opted, okay, let me be quiet. Let me listen to the sound of my voice. What am I really adamant and passionate about in this space? And it was about making industry change. I have now the opportunity to step forward and help industry, not just one organization in advancement, but all of my clients that have a chance to reach out to me and the team that I have a chance and so fortunate enough to work with, really changing the trajectory of what we're faced with when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. So I went forward. I jumped off mind and heart into the space of consulting. And in that drive home, I remember I was like, I don't know if I should have done this. This is great. But now comes the rubber in the road. Like now the clients have to pay out, sign those agreements, get those NDAs in. What does that look like now that I'm independent? So I remember after I cleaned out my desk, I talked to my old supervisor. He's supportive and encouraging. And he's like, you can do it. And I'm like, now I have to do it. But I remember that car ride home. I called someone specifically to say, hey, you know what? I have a new email address. I got some changes going on in my phone number. And that one moment was so pivotal. He said, you mean you're free? You can help me and my organization when it comes to implementing a professional development training on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. My mouth dropped. I mean, I hadn't even been 30 minutes before I left my office. I'm like, okay, the need is still there. It wasn't for me, a misinterpretation of where I was going with my life. Again, I was going forward to help the overall industry. And I'm so super excited I did. Of course, there's challenges, there's growth as a small business, as an entrepreneur, but more so I get excited about having my clients like learn, listen, and grow. And it's not about one little class they take and they're now experts. No, it's about the journey and going along with them, meeting them where they are so they're able to really implement sustainable, intentional practices within their organization, whether it be for employee resource group support, or if they're thinking about programs, business resource group, if you're wanting to anchor it to the mission, vision, and values and the strategic plan, or just thinking about things to recruit and retain employees. And so today's conversation is so critically important, especially as I loved how Kristina dived into high performers and grinding. And I thought, and before you said that, I was like, I'm a high performer. Here I am. I'm grinding all the time. There's that burnout that can happen to us while we're going and going and going. You're so right, Kristina. You have to press pause. You have to take those moments to smell the roses and take it all in to where you're going. So that forward step was just that, and I now have a chance to carve in my day, that coffee time, just for me. I have on my calendars, my team doesn't know. I won't tell you what the name is, but it's a meeting with such and such. And no one knows but me. So I know that time is for my mental health, my well-being, and to avoid that burnout. Because we're talking about DEI, which data shows that the average professional in this space stays usually about a year and a half because you're talking about emotional drain, you're talking about highly charged topics, inclusion, unconscious bias, the list goes on and on, all these emotionally driven areas. So a year and a half in this space, and like I've said, I've grown in this profession, in this area for over 18, 19 years. I forgot, stop counting on that. But nevertheless, I don't want to age myself, 18, 19 years in this area. And you're talking about having these conversations, project to project, company to company, community to community, inclusion, strategy, thinking about how can we be or have a differentiator. What makes our project team or our company in the West versus the East so uniquely different that clients come to us as a resource? And that same vein, I do that for all clients in this now space. And it's such a blessing to still have that same thing. And even that we talked about the data a little bit earlier, there's three factors: advancement, for impacting those for job change, advancement, pay, or work-life conflict. And the funny thing is, in my journey, in my stepping ahead, I didn't really have, I guess my advancement, right? Advancing the industry, but it wasn't necessarily a professional career thing. It was more of a mind for my journey, was mind and heart. What could I do to help overall? There were conversations, and there was also a piece of history that I found at that critical point that was being left. Like these policies and practices started in the 60s. They weren't anything new in 2021, 22 that was created, but it was educating and taking everyone on a journey of how that we can think about the future differently, and how that we can, now there's Infrastructure Investment Act, there's the job program, how do we really make sure that we as an industry advance and grow? And we had many people leaving, the Great Resignation. People were opting not to come back to construction, not because of the actual day-to-day hustle and bustle, because they're looking for more meaningful impact within their day-to-day job. So the next slide, I think we have a chance to dive into is some of the services that I have a chance to work with clients on. And the funny thing is, I thought I was going to start with employee resource group training, but I've been helping with request for proposal strategy when it comes to these large mega infrastructure projects. They'll tap me and the team to come on in and say, hey, what does our differentiator look like when it comes project to project? Or how do we engage this community that's 70% non-English speaking? What does that look like for strategy? Or even how do we educate our team internally for social impact so they can go out into the community and really be engaging and not standoffish? So these are kind of the things in this particular slide, and in mentorship and in women's groups that I have a chance to speak with about just being more inclusive. The next one. So here's some of the data that is going on from Microsoft to Tello to, of course, AGC of America and Autodesk, Deloitte, and then Pulsory, looking at 37% is continued to work in the same company with no better option. The interesting one is, I think I didn't even have a chance to update this particular slide, but I saw something that was quite shocking, that people are still, it was maybe an article from AGC of America that came out, people are still not coming to construction. So we have this huge barrier when it comes to really pivoting and thinking as a group, all-inclusive group, of what can we do different to really create this sense of belonging, and really casting that wider net into the trades, into the design, into the operations, pre-construction. The list goes on and on. There's so many roles that we can really market within our industry. So I encourage you to go back and look at those particular data sources, because there's some great information out there that you can look to really help you understand more about this journey for retention and inclusive culture. The road to recovery, we think about as an industry, or even if you think about your mindset, it's not a straight line. You have those moments where you have to pivot. You think about where you are, you're faced with such adversity, but you have to pivot in order to be a functioning professional. We as, there's 10 to 14% of industry that are women. So you think about all the hats that we wear. So many hats. It's a winding path, but through the valleys and the hills and twists and turns. And it's so much worth the journey overall. So that's information on who I am, and you can always stay in contact with me or LinkedIn, message me if you can't get a chance to write it down today. But again, think about the journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And during that time when we first were jumping all in, everyone was all in. DEI fatigue is truly, truly real. Most of the professionals in this space are burning out hand in hand, time and time again. And so it's really critical that you take that time to look at these points that Kristina touched on. How do you just come back? How do you come back strong? How do you practice more rest? But more so, it's empathy. The empathy that needs to happen during this time is so critically important. And employees on worksite need to focus on organizational culture and having the empathy ingrained in that.
That is incredible, and touches on so many factors. I think what Nathan and I were really hoping in this curated group here was there's a macro level of an individual perspective of what that one-to-one individual perspective looks like when tackling burnout. And then there's the micro view of an individual perspective, but then the macro view of what does this look like across project teams and some of these massive infrastructure projects. So Dr. G, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Kristina, thank you so much for giving us the insight and giving us the ability to kind of understand where we are. We have about 25 minutes here for Q&A. I have questions ready to go for our speakers, but I really want to open this up to you all as well. You all are adept at asking questions, even more so than me. So I really want to open it up and just see if anyone has any questions for Kristina or Dr. G on what they just presented. Please feel free to either put it in the chat or to come off mute if you want to be engaging and interactive. I'll give you guys a second.
See, Nick.
Kristina and I are having a little bit of a side conversation in the chat right now. But I think what would be fascinating is as this research is done is to kind of do some compare and contrast, see how individuals scoring relates to their manager scoring, and then see how, if they're misaligned, how that probably impacts the employee's score over time. And we can probably, so much of the conversation in chat is about this need for mentorship or guidance or someone really just helping pull us out of the weeds from time to time. And I bet, and having observed this many times, leadership, they're busy off doing other things. They forget to look back and see if they're pulling everyone behind them. So to have a rubric like this where we can be really thoughtful about alignment and start to see, does the young industry have the same vision for the profession as the way it's always been done? And how do we work together to maybe find better alignment? It just becomes an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, go for it, Kristina.
Yeah, what you made me think about is how when I speak to supervisors or people with direct reports, I notice that they usually live in one of those three camps. So you can already picture that, I'm sure, that purpose-driven one who's if there's not a clear message, then nothing's going to get done, right? Which is partially true. And then there's that other one that's this has got to be like a family. So if it's not like a family, then no one wants to work here. That's that curiosity play kind of person. Belonging type of person. And then there's the other leader that leads with curiosity. And it's okay, guys, we're going to have an impromptu brainstorm. And it's like, we have deadlines, you know, and like you can sort of see these different managers naturally appear. And it's a practice of understanding what you're naturally good at, belonging, purpose, or curiosity, and then figuring out like tactics and skills to bolster those other ones so that regardless of who you have working with you or under you or around you, it's sort of it's allowing everyone into that space to feel it.
Yeah, and I the first one with purpose, I answered like Grello, like I know what we need to do, but getting there isn't quite understood. And like as I transition to business development, I get the directive. It's like go make money or go make this much money, and then I'd respond back, well, where do you think it's coming from, or all of these other like the strategy aspect of the what that we want, and many times it's like that room for conversation about what that strategy doesn't exist, that strategy for how do we want to work together to reach these goals. I've seen that not beyond business development. And we have the beauty of construction is we all have different things to care about, which is what adds value to these projects. But because we all have different perspectives, we don't understand each other unless we communicate. And that lack of communication, I think, creates a lot of that friction.
But I think before understanding each other, we have to understand ourselves, right? And like so much of this is we get frustrated, but we don't exactly understand why we're frustrated because we don't fully understand. And I think Laurie, you said it that separating the signal from the noise, right? And like kind of what is your true north or your like the things that fill your cup or drain your cup, or insert your analogy here, but Laurie, anything you want to share? Because I think we're missing the point of like if you're not there, if you're not present, understanding, how can you help others, right?
As I'm texting my contractor who's coming in, and I have to give instruction just to. Yeah. There you go, busted. I think I've spent, I think Nathan and I were having a conversation last week, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about like, what does it mean to separate the signal from the noise in both a professional and a personal environment? And I think about that from a few different perspectives. I think one is just like a baseline. We are living in a world of information overload, right? Like we have more streams of information. We have more ways of contacting people. We all live in a world of Zoom where information is coming from all different points of view and from multiple different sources like Slack, email. I'm not going to lie, I don't check my email anymore. Or I scan first.
Noted.
Oh yeah, if I don't respond to you,
that's why I text you.
Decided last year, I decided to let go of the guilt of not answering the email a couple of days late. It was great and it's had no negative consequences in my life. So there's like the signal of the noise. And then I think there's also like, we've listened to a lot of stuff around diversity and inclusion. And I think there's also the sort of separating from the signal from the noise of like, I'm sure we are all in a place in our lives where maybe some things are happening that are out of control, that are just like essentially not fair. Right. We talked about implicit biases, we've talked about explicit biases. And there's also like, how do you find the right balance of accepting that what is happening is reality and you are not being gaslighted? Like this is statistically real. Whatever's happening to you is like, it's statistically real. 14% women representation in the industry. You guys can all look around your company and I'm sure your ownership or your board looks pretty white and male, right? Like statistically bias is happening. And also my ability to pull myself up by my bootstraps is not going to outweigh like sort of like the systemic things that are happening. But how do you move forward, even given that condition, right? Like, and so like, I've been thinking about that a lot lately in terms of like, what do I control? What do I release? How do I manage that topic? And so like, I don't really have any solutions except for like, really just bringing this explicitly forward, like almost it's like you've got to recognize it and you've got to own it. There is a lot of noise, whether it has to do with diversity and inclusion, whether it has to do with just general information overload, whether it has to do, as we said, with like personal conflict versus work conflict. And how do you both acknowledge that and like let that sit and that we're not going to be perfect, and also focus in on what's actually going to allow you to move forward. And I really like the categories, Kristina, that you brought forward in terms of like thinking about that. And it may be a balance of like, you can't own all three, but like right now I'm really going to focus on this curiosity aspect of it. So that's one thing that's been top of mind for me. And I'm curious if other folks have been thinking about similar topics, or, you know, how you've been exploring those types of things or these challenges.
And I think that Rob's been saying in the chat, Rob was bringing up some really, really great points around, well, that's the way we've always done it. And sometimes there's logic behind the way we've always done it. And the challenges with taking the time to explain that to someone to understand that. And sometimes their impatience with it is interpreted as arrogance, youthful arrogance. You think you know everything, which is every industry that's ever existed goes through that as generations, as the generations continue to grow and the next generation comes in. But what to me is a little bit different here, to Laurie's point, is we as an industry, that majority that we saw in the graph that is doing the lion's share of this work and is in those leadership positions, construction has the highest rate of suicide of any industry in the United States, in the UK, and in Australia. And so we have all of these factors and we have this noise, but what we're currently doing, how we're currently operating, the current way of doing things is coming at the cost of people's lives. And I don't know if we've necessarily accounted for the correlation between that, but the status quo of what we're doing and how we're operating in this new environment with 5 generations under one roof, with technology being implemented and interjected into analog ways of doing things, requires so much more emotional intelligence, so much more self-awareness, so much more self-regulation than I think leaders in the past have had to deal with. It's almost like we have to unlearn what we've leveraged or used as our go-to behavior in order to get things done. And Kristina, there's something that you had talked about. Your target in doing a lot of this work is for looking at that superintendent in the field. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you see superintendents being a little bit of a puzzle piece here to cause some of this shift and change culturally.
Yeah, that I don't know what it is. I feel like some things that you do in your work or in your life, you just kind of feel like there's like a switch there. And that's how it is with me and superintendents, and getting them to be more understood if they are misunderstood, but also working better with support staff and their direct reports. It feels like they're in such a unique position, just like any other middle management type of supervisor, who they have people to report to and down, and it just gets a lot of stress. And so my favorite person to work with is a superintendent. There's this story that I tell. Do I have time to tell the? Okay. There's a story I tell about this man. His name is Christian. How old was he actually? 60? I think 60. And he spoke like multiple languages, highly intelligent, all these things, but English wasn't one of them. And so there was a lot of miscommunication between people he was working with. And I would hear some stuff like, he's too difficult. He's keeping all the stuff to himself. He's not sharing. Just very negative, combative. And if you think of it objectively, you'd think this person is horrible and's got to go. But I spoke to him because I'm just like curious, and I'm like, there's got to be something going on with this guy, like he can't just be an asshole for the sake of it, or maybe he is, but we would find out. And when I first spoke to him, he was very kind and everything. And then after 1 minute, he started to cuss me out. Like maybe it was 40 seconds. I don't know. It was a blur at this point, but it happened really fast. And he was literally walking away from me and just like, blah, 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 blah. I don't need this bullshit. And you guys and your you guys thing, it's just like them versus us. So quick, it escalated. And I went back and Charlie, you were there, and he probably sees it a lot better because I was just like stunned, and I'm like, that did not go well, you know. And it was this idea that I went in and I started talking to him directly about like work, in the sense of like, I need something from you because you're not doing something well. And I didn't mean it that way, but he had been combated with that over and over and over again. So it was a trigger. And what I did instead is I used Google Translate. I wrote a message in French. I apologize. I'm like, look, man, I got a job. You got a job. Just trying to get this done. I didn't mean anything by it. And created common ground in similarity. I find sometimes we need to find the things that we have in common with people, more so than what we have different, to create that initial bond. And so I did that. I'm telling this story really short because we don't have too much time, but it turned out in the end, he was telling me about like how he'd been on this job, not this job, but in the industry for decades. He used to go to the job site when he was a kid with his dad, and just like really touching stuff. And then he gave me his secret plan. He's like, this is the real schedule. And he didn't say it because in English, but he's like, this one, that's trash or something like that. And I knew what trash was in French. And it was just really good. And then we spent like the next hour talking. And he told other people to like go away so that we could have this conversation that was impromptu. And so I feel like there's such like a catalytic moment when it comes to superintendents, and it's not as hard as we might think. It's much more about like meeting people where they're at, and having more of an empathetic approach, instead of like, here, I'm here to fix all the stuff that you suck at, you know, like, which is kind of the technologist approach sometimes. I can't even remember what you necessarily asked me, but I'm just thinking about him and like how much of an impact there was from a 1 minute versus an hour, and how different they were in the same day.
Yeah, it goes to the EQ piece of it.
Yeah.
Well, but I also feel like we assume that there's a direct correlation between the amount of time you spend working and your likelihood of being burnt out. And that's not necessarily true. Like if you truly love what you're doing and you're engaged and it's fun and it's rewarding and all those things, and you're finding balance, you know, you can work a ton. If you're that type of a high performer and you just have that much energy, good for you. It's not me, but
Yeah.
those people exist. And so,
He was the high performer that had no belonging.
yeah, right.
He was thinking of so many great ideas, curiosity playing in his own head, in his own language. And he had so much purpose. He knew exactly what he was going to do. But when it came to belonging, no one understood him. He didn't trust his management. He didn't trust all of his team. And like, he didn't actually feel like he was being advocated for or invested in. So that's why he was so combative. And by starting to feed the part that's been diminished, you started to see more collaboration. Yeah.
The lonely high performer.
And that's funny. We think about, I mean, high performer, we're like so all into the work and the day-to-day, our to-do list and making it all happen. But the interesting part is there's something else that we're forgetting about. While we're high performing in one bucket, something else is getting shortchanged. Like we think about the circles that Kristina had a chance to show earlier. Just think about if they were your gas tank, in essence. Some is going to be higher, obviously fuller, some may middle. And of course, there might be some buckets on your gas tank might be empty. I think about a personal journey for me was as I was a high performer, right? I'm a recovering high performer. We're a high performer in corporate America, working, get there, you know, about 6 a.m. because you got to meet the people out in the field. You got to get there early. And then I was like, I got to still do work. So I would stay at work until like 7:30, getting stuff done, right? Preparing for the next day, presentation, PowerPoint, looking at numbers. Where are we at in this project? Where are we at in this region? Where are we at in this division? All these stuff that needs to be done. Then I have a son, the empty. How much time is this mom spending while I'm 6 a.m, 8 p.m. at the office? So one of my little buckets wasn't getting the fuel needed to thrive. And I thought, again, high performer, high performer. So as I jump now, mind and heart first, into this consulting space, as I not only change what I do on a day-to-day basis, I also change my buckets. Where am I fueling myself? How much am I doing? And then again, like I touched on earlier, modifying. When I feel like something's a little bit off, I got to adjust, because I don't want to have burnout. I don't want to give. Yes, I want this company is my baby. I want it to thrive and do well, but I also have a little baby. It's 13, needs my help, needs mommy. So balancing those buckets so that there is no burnout and I can show up 100% for clients and family. So I think there was someone who says it. I think it's even, it's not workforce or work-life balance. It's work-life adjustment, to adjust as you go along.
Yeah, and I agree. Jeffrey, you have your hand up, so I want to give you, we're getting close to time, so I want to give you and then Kelly a chance to ask your question or comment.
Yeah, I think Dr. G kind of gets to the point where I had to realize 2016, I had a moment where I was basically suicidal, and a large part of it was stress of work, which caused me to sleep less, which caused further paranoia, which then caused me to, enjoy my family less. And, all being said and done, I had to realize that no job, no task, no job, no client, nothing was more important than a human life. Nothing we do. I don't care what your boss says. I don't care how big the job is, how many millions of dollars are invested, whatever. Nothing is more important than a human life. And so, I was lucky in that, I recognized it. I realized I needed help. I went to a doctor. First thing was get you some sleep. And then it made me really reevaluate what I was doing in the job I was doing. Now, it took me a couple of years to get out of that work. And I never fully resolved with some people at that job, with some of the managers, to say, look, you guys are kind of terrible at managing people. And the reason is that when you put our tasks and our jobs over our own personal lives and health, you got lives and health, you got it wrong. And I think dealing a lot with my European colleagues has, also helped sort of realize that it's, you don't, that work it's a job, it's a thing you do. And yes, it helps pay the bills and everything. And yes, you can be passionate about it. And yes, you can identify with it. But at some point you have to draw a line. You just have to draw a line, high performance or not. You have to draw a line, and that's okay. And everybody should respect that from the very top of your company and down. If they don't, you gotta get out. You gotta do something else and find a place or a group that, even if it's not by yourself, which is what I did too, is you gotta find something that says, people respect those boundaries and they respect you as a human being. They may disagree with you, but they respect you as a human being, and nothing's more important than your life, your family's lives, and so on.
Jeffrey, I appreciate you sharing that, truly. And I think this audience, of all audiences, probably feels a ping of relatability in what you just shared. And that's kind of why we're having this conversation, is we can't all leave the industry and start our own companies in order to have balance. How do we build it?
Wait. Maybe we can. What if all of us just, left and, started?
We'll ponder that while Kelly.
Okay,
Kelly,
sorry.
I want to give you a moment.
It's an option.
It is an option. Kelly, what does that make you think of? Or did you lose your thought? Sorry.
Yeah. So, I've gone through small burnout several times. In some ways I've ended up leaving the company I was with and moving on, which I think, a lot of us talk about how that's repeating the cycle. And throughout the years, I've worked on ways to kind of break through that mentality and find different ways to do that. And I think there's, a few important things that I've learned along the way from coworkers, from friends, from other people in the industry that, that we all need to sort of maintain. And I think, one thing that really comes to mind is that being a high performer doesn't mean giving 100% at all times, right? We can't be 100% efficient at 100% of the time. You just can't operate in that mentality. That'll burn you out very, very quickly. Like Dr. G was saying, it's very important to maintain that balance, because if you're high performing in one area, it means that you're sacrificing in another area. And one of the benefits that we saw of COVID and all this remote work is now kind of rolling back, which is that, we got to be at home and be able to take time to do other things in between working, right? And it kind of made this natural efficiency cycle, right? Where, okay, I focus on work for a little bit, and then I take a break and I, take the kid to the dentist, and then I come home and I do some more work, and then I, fold some laundry or whatever it is. And we see that the industry is doing a couple of things with that, which is, some companies are saying, well, we liked remote work at first, but now we kind of want you back in the office, or we want hybrid work, which is kind of starting to roll back that ability to be flexible, to be able to say, I'm on here now. Okay, now I'm off here and I'm on here, and right, and be able to redistribute into those buckets. And the other is that a lot of us put that 100% on ourselves to be on all the time, right? That, well, I'm working from home, and so it's easy to sit at my desk and do that work. And though I walked away for a minute to take the kid to the dentist or to fold the laundry, I then stay at my desk even longer in the evening and do more and more work. And that contributes to the burnout just as much as it does being in the office and not being able to get some of those things done. And I think it takes a shift in both ourselves internally as workers and in the industry as employers and as a group, to understand that the value in what we provide as workers is about what we produce, not about when we're doing it or exactly what time we're there doing it. It's about, I got my job done. I met my deadline. I provided what other people needed in a timely manner. I sat in the meetings that I was there. If you're doing those things, what difference does it make if you spent half the day sitting at the DMV, or if you spent, if you took a couple of minutes to go fold laundry, or if you decided to take the morning and, take your kids to the park? Because isn't that we're getting compensated for what we do? If you're a high performer, well, I can get it done faster. That compensation is the same. And getting people to understand that mentality and switch over to that yes, I'm high performing. I can get this done for you in 10 hours, regardless of if I am working a 40-hour work week, regardless of if you want it in 5 days or if you want it in 5 months. Those types of things need to be done in a way that helps support our workers, that give them that balance. Because, as Jeffrey said, nothing is worth a human life, and it's not. And my form of levity that a friend taught me, who was unfortunately in a much more dire situation, taught me to remind myself, and I now remind other people, we're not saving dying babies. We are building buildings. That building is going to get built. We are going to find ways to get things done. My partner works for a large grocery chain in technology. People are still going to buy groceries. Okay? We're not saving a baby who's dying. We're still going to get the work done. We're going to get there. And so anything that we think constitutes an emergency, is it really an emergency? Is somebody in the hospital dying? Is a life being lost over it? Or are we just putting a priority on it because someone put an arbitrary priority on it and wants to put money and profits and economic priority to it?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really, really good point here, Kelli, which is the chat is just going off on some of these new ways of thinking about this, of operating. Bias here as a technologist, as somebody who worked in industry, and I left industry to go to the dark side of technology because I saw it as a great equalizer. As a woman, I was thinking about my trajectory to want to have a family, and technology allowed freedom of responding and communicating and doing deliverables that didn't require you to necessarily be chained to the desk. And here we are 20 plus years later, and I see that technology has enabled a lot of that reality, but are the mindsets driving the policies, the programs, and how we operate businesses shifting along to meet that. Laurie, I want to definitely call on you now and then have you recall out your ask of the group, maybe to share a reflection or a takeaway from today as well.
Yes, to be fair, I don't think it was my ask, but I'm happy, but it's a good one. So I'm happy to reiterate. One thing I would actually question, just like what we're doing, I question the concept of an individual high performer. And I think that essentially what I mean by that is like, it doesn't actually matter if you are individually can produce a lot of work, if you're not part and contributing to a system that is successful. And you individually can't save a system that is not successful, no matter how much individual effort. Like, there are no heroes in this world. And I think a lot of people who are very smart fall into that trap, me included, of like, I'm going to do this through sheer will. I'm going to force this. And so I think it's actually rather comforting. Like, on my teams, I was just like, I think it is almost egotistical to think that you cannot take vacation. You can take vacation. Everybody will be fine. There is a system built up around you. And we are all replaceable. We are not commodities, but we are all replaceable. And that is a good thing. And I actually find a lot of comfort in that. And this like idea of like, it is not on my shoulders to carry, well, Autodesk in my case. It's, and it's not on my shoulders to make this successful. So I would just toss that out there. And I would also toss out that this fits in with a shifting perception of like what we do and how we're working. We've gone from a production industry to a service industry. A lot of our jobs, even in construction, which is one of the most production oriented things, is actually more about negotiations, soft skills, moving things forward, complex projects, complex problems. And that falls more squarely into the work smart than work hard. You can't force a complex problem. So that's another thing I would go into this, and also tie that to we've always done it this way. That may no longer apply. And that may no longer apply for two reasons. One is because we're shifting this industry, and two is because of diversity and inclusion. You have more people with more perspectives and different ways of doing things. So, there's a time and a place for this is not the time for the conversation. I am the decision maker and we are going to proceed in this way. And also there's a time and a place for, hey, let's actually do a deep dive into this. If this is important, let's talk about it and let's go back to the root cause and let's talk about what we're trying to achieve here. I always joke that project engineers and construction sites are really good at doing 12 steps really efficiently, as opposed to thinking about whether you can do it in 3. So there's an opening there. With that, I'll turn it to the ask of if folks want to go around and have a takeaway from this conversation or talk about an insight that they came to listening to this conversation.
And Nate has his hand up, so Nate, we'll start with you.
Start.
The whole time you guys were talking about this, I kept going to I remember thinking that my work ethic was measured by the time that I spent sitting in my chair. And so working smarter, not harder, kind of wasn't an issue, because you were going to work as hard as you were going to work for as long as you were sat there to make sure you got perceived as somebody contributing. And the ageism piece is interesting, of the younger you are, the more your value is in how much you can do, not how much you know, versus if I worked for 5 hours and only touched 4 things and it changed the direction of the business, that would be valuable at 60. My takeaway is the structural. The perception of, well, I'm the project manager, I'm the superintendent. If I take a vacation, there is no one on the team that's doing this job. They don't know the schedule. They don't have all of the other pieces of this. They don't price the change orders. So by a structure of assignment of roles and responsibilities, we've sort of created that feeling of I can't step away because this thing breaks down and there's no one to do the job when I leave. Unless your boss wants to come in and try to figure that out, but he has the same problem as a ops manager. So that's my takeaway, is you kind of have to change the way the teams engage from you are responsible for P&L. You do the changes. You don't have committee because there aren't enough people to do it, and to share that responsibility distributed. The analogy I used to use as a project manager was your strength on a team is strands of rope, right? Strength and overlap, not in demarcation of where the responsibility starts and stops on handoff. But it's hard to actually implement that from a well, you do the projections then, assistant.
Yeah, very true. Anyone else takeaway, aha moment or action item that you're taking away from today?
Jackson, you've been quiet.
I have been quiet. I've been taking a lot in, trying to. So I think that going back to the assessment, the SoBuilt assessment, I just was envisioning how to bring that to my team, and I think it's really important. So I'd like to kind of figure out how to do the framework. We're getting ready to roll out our performance review system for the first time in the company the next couple of weeks, and so I think there's an opportunity to maybe pull some of that in to help gauge with my team where are they on purpose, belonging, and their play. So that's my takeaway for today. Try to figure out how can I do that without overloading my team with more of my my out of left field ideas. So
anticipate their reaction, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been pencilly thinking about how to do that to not overload them. So
awesome.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a thought. I think Nate, what you were just saying, it kind of triggered it, and I don't even know what this thought is, but it is something, so I'll share it. And it's this idea of how hard it can be to actually step away and say, I can take vacation or whatever. I can put work away when you've been in an industry for so long that it is your lifestyle. Because I'm thinking of a few people right now, like if they did say that, they would see it as less worth. And there's something there that needs to be navigated before you just say, you need to take some time off. And like, it can't just be, you need to take time off, because if somebody has that like ingrained in them, then you're telling them like, we don't need you. You don't have worth here. Take some time off. And I just, it's just an idea, or it's just like a nuance that I'm realizing when it comes to how long in you've been in the industry or how long you've been in a cycle.
I can validate it for you personally. I've been outside of construction for just over 3 years, and I still have to. One of my goals is to try to find a way to go to a cafe or somewhere outside of my home desk to work for a little while, because I can. Like I could go sit at that lodge in Pebble Beach and eat a hamburger with my laptop, and I haven't done it in 3 years living here. Just because it's like sit at your desk from now, it's just less hours, right? 8 to 3:30 instead of 6 to 7.
Well, maybe you need to think about like just like sit on your ass, right? And it's like, well, I can do that anywhere. Maybe you just need to reframe it a little bit, just like
Yeah. I'm just saying it's a thing, right? I mean, 12 years of patterning is like, hey, time served in seat is value.
Yeah.
And I want to call out Rob Sloyer's comment earlier in the chat that medicine moved from that hero approach to the specialist and team approach. And that, he feels construction is heading in that same way. And I think that's hitting the nail on the head. We have the technology that enables the value of individuals that are this creating of this team to show up, operate in different ways. That's the transformation piece that I just haven't seen take place yet. The conversation around the laborers in the field and how do we give the same flexibility to laborers in the field? We have technology that would allow us to have somebody opt onto a job site, opt off a job site, track what was the work put in place to be able to keep individuals able to then come to that job site and continue work, having somebody being able to opt out. We have technology in place that allows us to turn to that services model. But some of the biggest barriers are, we can talk about contracts and we can talk about the legal side of this, but we're thinking more along individuals, self-awareness, and the ability to lead and interact differently. Those are some of the, I think for me, this is the biggest takeaway is transformation is more about the human element here than it is about the technology. So I want to make sure that Rob's comment was there. So Rob, you don't have to come off unless you want to say what your aha moment is today, because you've had such great comments. I'm curious to see if you've had an action item or a takeaway.
I think the one comment that I made earlier in the thread about, you just have to, as a manager, you have to be willing and able to treat people as individuals.
And that kind of just bridges a lot of the stuff that gets, lumped into like a DE&I bucket or a retention bucket or whatever. Is like, we break it up into these different categories, but it really just comes down to like, being willing to kind of treat your people like people and have conversations with them and let them see that you're willing to treat them like people. And, in some cases, even letting them know that if that's not something that comes naturally to you, there's nothing wrong with saying that and saying, look, this isn't my natural skill set, right? I didn't get to where I am by like, especially in this business, by necessarily like being nice to everybody and caring about everybody, right? So being able to say that to your people and say, hey, I'm trying, right? You got to help me out here. I think this conversation just kind of reinforced that idea for me.
Peter, that's so sorry, Rob. Yeah, no, I agree that it definitely reinforces that idea, which is an uncomfortable space for many. Peter, thank you for your note. I was actually going to call on you next, so sorry you have to leave us. That's fine. But we have just 1 minute left. I do want to see if there's anyone else who has an aha moment or takeaway, a direct takeaway based on what you heard today.
I was just going to chime in on Rob's comment there, and I think the honest truth is a lot of our clients don't look at our people on the job sites as people. I think a lot of the funding sources and a lot of the people that are out there in this industry that are procuring the built environment, they look at craft workers and people on the ground as secondary citizens. And, I've experienced it in like just people coming to us and just like, well, what do you mean you can't be here tomorrow and work? And it's like, dude, like we have lives, we have things. And so I think there's a big challenge to helping a lot of people who profit off of the procurement system of the built environment, who drive our industry from the owner's seat. We've got to educate them on the turmoil, the waste and the detriment to human life. Because if they don't understand the detriment that they're causing by procuring the built environment in the way that they've continually been doing it, and the results that we're seeing are, because we don't create time contractually, we don't allow for these kinds of things to naturally occur in the environment, because it is go. The schedule's 6 months behind already through no fault of the construction team or design team. Just, really there's a big owner education piece that I think our industry is missing. And I think that the perception of a lot of owners is they don't care about the people on their job sites or in like they're bringing their built environment. And that's a whole different discussion, I think. But I think that's something that is at the root of a lot of this is they look at our industry and our people as a lot of times second class citizens, and the contracts, the conversations and the behaviors reflect that.
We're officially over time, but I saw Jim pop on, and if you got the time, if you want to share any final thoughts or just that you agree with Jackson.
No, as I listen to this today, it's that reality that, most of the people doing the work in construction, that's sometimes I listen to our conversations and it's all good stuff. There's nothing I disagree with at all. But the reality is that vast majority of this industry is small to mid-sized contractors, and they're faced with exactly what Jackson says. So every time I try to give our employees more room and do more for them, it bites me in the butt every time as a business owner. And it's a tough thing to do, because you want to be this, but the realities push you back to this. And in the end, if I'm not making money, I can't do any of this. And so that's the ongoing tension that exists, even with DEI kind of stuff. All that, there's this incredible tension that exists.
Yeah. And I think that's where we can learn a lot from DEI efforts that have gotten, federal mandate and other requirements. That is what ultimately makes that happen. It is what it is, right? And so how do you take a similar approach in getting other wellness and things incorporated, at more of a regulation level? Because otherwise, you can't justify the business side of it.
I haven't had a week this month in the last 30 days where I haven't had an owner coming back and requesting that our guys work Friday, Saturday, and Sundays in the middle of summer during holidays.
So, Jim,
it's like,
Can I
think
share how I push back
Oh.
against that? Because I think I've learned from this team using the stats of we have the second
Yes.
highest rate of suicide in the industry. You want my people to work and not have a life? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna. So that, and then the annual deficit of trade workers is something like 500,000 jobs need to be filled currently, and so I put those stats back to the owner. I say I'm not going to do that to my people because your work is important, but so is keeping, and like using those stats to leverage those conversations with owners. I've had a lot of success because they really just don't even think about livelihood of the people on the job site. So
I like
it's
this. I like this because Nathan raised a great point talking about policy and practices. And then Jackson, I love how you talked about just a reality, like those policies and practices exist, but there's real people fighting day to day. There's a high, number of people, suicide. And what do we do to keep our teams intact? So there's the application. Like even now in this space, I used to talk about small business inclusion and what the businesses need to do and be. But then there comes my submission of my invoice and the processing and going through that payment, and you have to wait. And I'm like, how long do I have to wait? Why is there slowage? I need to keep my lights on. All these things that I used to say before because of the policy, right? Because I didn't understand. I like every 2 weeks I got my check. I didn't have to worry about all this stuff. But again, the policy. But then, like Jackson, you talked about, those practices and the implementation of how it impacts the people. Now I'm in those shoes of the business community, and I'm like, whoa, it's night and day. So you're right, spot on when it comes to the people out there in the field and reminding people and standing and holding the line, because it's critically important that we have to educate the owners about, like, yeah, we have these policies, but here, this is the person behind it all that makes it happen.
And Jackson, your point about contracts, it really will eventually come back to contractual language that permits that kind of deal to happen. I say no. You don't give me enough notice, it's not going to happen. But the reality is there's just a lot of tension. This is a weird industry, and it's getting weirder.
Yeah, if people are taught to beat us over the head with their contract, and they don't realize the personal side of what they're asking a lot of times. I've been in those shoes as a superintendent where I didn't realize what I was asking and the pain I was causing by just demanding you need to be here. I didn't care about anything else. Now I'm on the other side of the shoe, and I got a check that's 90 days late for $160,000. I'm like we've done everything right. Like we've done everything you said, contractor. Where's our money? And like just seeing some of the stuff like from both sides now has just been really been eye opening, and it's. Now, I won't say it's fun to me, but it's like I really look for an opportunity to push back and say, like, hang on, you're not thinking, like, I've been in your shoes. You're not thinking about what you're asking my people to do. And, really just spend the time challenging people as much. I mean, it's one conversation at a time, one new perspective that we can change at a time.
And that kind of leads in nicely to where I wanted to kind of end today. Now you've had some expert views from Kristina and Dr. G. Thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your stories with us. Thank you all for leaning in and participating and sharing your comments and your thoughts. But I wanted to make sure this group was aware that there's a global campaign to raise awareness around the mental health challenges in construction, and to raise this not just in the industry, but to that comment around owners and general awareness. The B1N, Fred Mills with the B1M and Procore have partnered together to create a global campaign. Last month, we were in London. It was all through the tube. Advertisements get construction talking all through the tube. In London, we had a launch event. There's going to be a session at Procore's Groundbreak User Conference in September, and then in Australia in November. The whole focus of this is to bring it into the general awareness, to create a little more of an understanding of the crisis in construction is not just a construction problem, but it impacts all of our lives, and it's something that has an impact on how projects and buildings are built in the places we worship, and we get married, and we educate, and we heal. And so this is not just a construction problem, but it is a larger problem at large. But most importantly, this is really focused on getting individuals in construction to have conversations, not dissimilar to what we just had here today. So I wanted to make sure that you all saw there's a campaign trying to raise $1 million for the nonprofits in this space, CIASP here in the US. friend of CPC's, in the work that we've been doing around mental health. But wanted to make sure that you are aware of this. And if you need information, literature, or something to have that conversation with an owner to elevate the conversations you're having around labor, this is a great place to have a place to start and have resources to enable those conversations. So with that, I feel like we could have literally gone on another hour. I probably would have teetered into therapy, which I'm all for, but I'm so glad that we had a chance to have this conversation. Thank you, Nathan, for pulling it together. I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, this was amazing. I just basically hit away all of the slides except for the two most important ones for updates for a couple folks that may not be aware. So from a CPC standpoint, we will be together with Kurt in Minneapolis in September, doing CDX workshop around sustainability and ESG. So should be a little bit of overlap there and good exposure to a bunch of owner groups around change management and hopefully broaching the subject on similar style conversations. The other thing to announce, we did set our date and location for next year's summit. So everyone will be getting that hold invite for April 17th to the 19th. Is a Thursday through Friday in Austin. There is not snow in Austin, so we will not be skiing for our networking event. We're going to be doing, there's a very cool place called Bolden Acres that's sort of a bar and restaurant / pickleball courts. So anyone that's never played pickleball, it's all the new rage. Make sure and bring your knee braces and ankle braces so you don't get hurt. But we'll be doing a fun little pickleball tournament for those that want to play and hanging out, as well as solving some of these bigger industry problems. So excited to bring these different groups together, all the great organizations and associations that we've met from design side all the way through the trades and the fabricators and the manufacturers that are all trying to solve this data problems. The more we can get them to come together, enjoy themselves, take a load off, but also, do some deep thinking on some big problems, I think we can really go somewhere with it. So excited to share more information on that coming up. We'll be back together pretty quickly here since we delayed those two technical conversations. We're looking at September 6th. I'm going to confirm that those times work and whether or not we're going to have any folks from Europe joining us on the standards conversation. And I will leave it unless anyone has any quick announcements that I forgot that they want to share with the group. But this was an amazing conversation. I really do thank everyone for making the time. I feel like COVID was a nice time for us to make an excuse to have them, but then everyone kind of just got busy and stopped having them. And I'm hoping that we can not do that and keep this culture and keep these things going. So thank you all for making the time to do that. And thank you, Sasha. You're amazing at leading these. We couldn't do it without you.